Okay, I want to start this off with a little bit of a visualization experiment.
Mm.
I'm going to ask you to picture something, and I'm willing to bet good money I know exactly what pops into your head.
I'm always game for a psychological experiment. Let's do it.
All right. Close your eyes for a second, unless you are driving or operating heavy machinery, in which case, please keep them wide open.
Please do.
But for everyone else, picture the single most famous image in the history of psychology. When I say psychology diagram, what is the first shape that hits your brain?
Oh, it has to be a triangle. A colorful, multi-layered pyramid.
Exactly. The pyramid, the hierarchy of needs. We have all seen it. It is arguably the biggest meme in the history of behavioral science.
It really is.
It is in every Psych 101 textbook. It is in management seminars. It is probably stapled to a corkboard in a break room somewhere right now next to a poster about washing your hands.
It's just ubiquitous. You have the orange or red bar at the bottom for food and water, and you climb your way up level by level until you reach that little purple triangle at the top.
Right. And it seems so simple. It seems so tidy. You get your lunch, you get a house, you get some friends, you get a promotion, and boom, you win the game of life. But here's the thing, and this is exactly why we are doing this deep dive today.
Okay.
That colorful triangle. It is, if not a lie, a massive oversimplification. It is hiding a much darker, much more complex, and frankly, a much more inspiring story.
That is absolutely right. We treat Maslow's hierarchy like a video game, complete level 1, unlock level 2. But the man behind it, Abraham Maslow, he wasn't designing a checklist for HR departments. He was trying to start a revolution.
Yeah.
He was trying to completely flip the script on how we understand human nature.
So our mission today is to rescue Maslow from the motivational posters. We are going to move way beyond the pop psychology version.
We have to.
We are going to unpack his tragic backstory, which I have to say, looking at the source material, I was genuinely shocked by. It is not the happy hippie story I expected at all.
No, it is heavy stuff.
Yeah.
But it explains everything, absolutely everything about the theory.
And we are going to reveal the hidden layers of the hierarchy that almost always get left out of the Instagram infographics.
The ones that nobody talks about.
Exactly. And we are going to talk about what it really means to reach the top, to be self-actualized. Because it turns out it's not just about being happy. It's about something much, much harder than that.
It's about the struggle. It's about the struggle against your own potential. It's about the fight to become who you really are.
So let's get into it. To understand why this pyramid exists and why it was such a big deal when it came out, we have to understand the world Maslow was living in. He is often called the spiritual father of humanistic psychology.
Right.
They called it the third force.
The third force, which, it implies there were two other forces dominating the landscape that he was fighting
It
against.
sounds like a geopolitical thriller or something. The third force.
It does.
But these were intellectual forces. So what was the landscape of psychology like in the 1930s and 40s? What was he pushing back against that made his ideas so radical?
Well, if you walked into a university psychology department in, say, 1940, or you looked at the clinical practices of the time, you really only had two choices. It was a completely binary world. Door number one was behaviorism.
This is the Pavlov stuff, right? The bells and the drooling dog.
Exactly. Pavlov's dogs, John Watson, and later B.F. Skinner with his rats in a box. The behaviorists viewed human beings essentially as machines.
Like robots.
It's biological robots, yeah. You push a button or you ring a bell and you get a response. We are just a bundle of conditioned reflexes.
So, in that worldview, there is no soul, there's no creativity, no free will, no mystery. It's just input-output. You poke the machine reacts.
Precisely. If you can't measure it in a lab, if you can't see it, it doesn't exist. Love, hope, ambition.
Just noise.
To them, those are just fuzzy words for chemical reactions or conditioned histories. It was a very sterile view of humanity, very cold.
Okay, that's bleak. What was door number two?
Door number two was psychoanalysis, the school of Sigmund Freud.
The cigar-smoking interpreter of dreams, the man himself.
The one and only. Now, Freud contributed a massive amount to our understanding of the unconscious. We can't discount that. We really can't.
Of course not.
But his focus was almost entirely on the sick, the neurotic, the miserable. He built his entire theory of humanity by studying what was wrong with people.
Right.
He looked at the crippled side of the human psyche, repressed memories, childhood trauma, neurosis, hysteria.
So Maslow looks at this landscape. On one side, he sees robots who don't feel anything. And on the other side, he sees broken, miserable neurotics who feel too much of all the wrong things. And he basically just says, is this it? Is this all we are?
Exactly. That's
Yeah.
the moment of insight. Maslow's core argument was brilliant in its simplicity. He said effectively, if you only study the crippled, you produce a crippled psychology.
I love that phrase.
It's so powerful. And think about it this way. If you want to know how fast a human being can run, how do you find that out? Do you study the average runner?
No, of course not, because the average person gets winded running for the bus.
Exactly. And do you study the runner with a broken leg?
Definitely not. That tells you absolutely nothing about potential speed.
No. You study the fastest runner you can find. You study the Olympic gold medalist. You study the best. You look at the peak of capability to understand the species.
That is such a powerful framing. To understand the limits of human potential, you have to look at the humans who are actually living up to their potential. You don't look at the sick to understand health.
That is the paradigm shift. That's a revolution. From studying sickness to studying health. From focusing on our limitations and our traumas to focusing on our possibilities. That is the birth of the third force.
But here is the irony, and this is the part of the biography that really, really stuck with me. You would think the guy who championed human potential, who coined the term self-actualization, who talked about love and belonging, you'd think he came from a house full of hugs and encouragement. You'd think he had the perfect childhood.
It was the exact opposite. Abraham Maslow's early life was, by his own account, a nightmare, an absolute nightmare.
Let's talk about that. Because I think it explains why he needed this theory so badly. This wasn't just academic for him. This was personal survival.
Completely. He was born in 1908 in Brooklyn, the oldest of 7 children to Jewish immigrant parents from Russia. And he described himself as being alone in the world.
And it wasn't just, a vague sense of existential loneliness. It was physical insecurity, right?
Oh, yeah.
He really didn't like what he saw in the mirror.
Oh, deeply. He was scrawny, he had a prominent nose, and he was incredibly self-conscious about it. In a different family, maybe that would have been soothed or reassured.
Right.
But his family, specifically his father, made it exponentially worse.
The source notes mentioned a specific family gathering that just, it made my stomach turn reading it.
Imagine this scene, a large family gathering, uncles, cousins, everyone is there. And Maslow's father points at him in front of everyone and asks loudly, "Isn't Abe the ugliest kid you've ever seen?"
My God. To your own son, in front of the whole clan.
It left him with a massive, crushing inferiority complex. Maslow said he felt peculiar, wrong, like there was something fundamentally broken about him physically and mentally. But believe it or not, the relationship with his father was actually the better of the two.
Okay, so we have to talk about the mother, Rose Maslow.
Rose Maslow. This is where the story gets truly, truly dark.
The source material mentions he refused to even attend her funeral. That is such a heavy statement for a son to make.
He characterized her as a horrible creature. She wasn't just cold, she was actively cruel. She was deeply superstitious and punished him constantly for tiny infractions. But there's one anecdote that stands out. And honestly, listener, this is difficult to hear, but you have to hear it to understand the man.
This is the kitten incident.
This is the kitten incident. Young Maslow was a lonely kid. He was desperate for some kind of connection, some affection he just wasn't getting at home.
Right.
And one day, he found 2 stray kittens in the street.
Just a kid trying to take care of something, finding something small to love.
Exactly. He brought them home. He knew he wasn't allowed to have them, so he hid them in the basement. He was feeding them milk from a saucer, trying to keep them quiet.
And his mother found him.
She did. She heard them meowing. And when she came down and found them, she didn't just tell him to put them back outside. She didn't just yell at him.
No.
She started screaming. She grabbed the kittens, and she bashed their heads against the basement wall until they were dead. Right in front of him.
I mean, that is purely psychopathic behavior. That is absolutely horrifying.
It is. It's a level of brutality that's hard to comprehend. And Maslow said later that his entire life's work, the focus on kindness, on humanism, on the potential for good, was a reaction against everything she stood for.
He was trying to prove her wrong.
He was trying to prove her wrong. He was trying to prove that humans weren't inherently cruel and vicious like she was.
It's almost like he built an entire school of psychology to save himself. To prove to himself that his mother wasn't the definition of humanity.
I think that's a very fair assessment. He actually said, "With my childhood, it's a wonder I'm not psychotic." He knew how close he came to being completely broken by it.
So how did he cope? How does a kid with that much trauma not crumble or turn into a monster himself?
He used what Alfred Adler, another great psychologist, would call compensation. First, he tried to compensate for his physical feelings of inferiority through athletics.
The classic get big strategy.
Exactly. He tried to get strong to make up for feeling ugly and weak, but that didn't work out. He wasn't naturally athletic. So he pivoted. He turned to books.
His refuge.
The library became his sanctuary. He would literally sit on the steps of the library in the morning just waiting for the doors to open. He read everything. He escaped his ghetto of poverty and loneliness through education.
And eventually he found something else that saved him. Or rather, someone.
Yes, love. He married his first cousin, Bertha. Now, we should note that was not uncommon at the time, even if it sounds a bit strange to our modern ears. But for Maslow, it was everything. He was 20, she was 19. He said his life had literally no meaning until he married her. It gave him that first real taste of belonging, which, not coincidentally, becomes the crucial middle layer of his hierarchy.
So he has this foundation of love now. He's stable. But academically, he didn't start as a humanist. He actually started in the camp of the enemy, didn't he?
He did. It's so ironic. He was at the University of Wisconsin, totally enraptured by behaviorism. He thought it was the future. He thought it could save the world.
What was he studying?
He was doing research on dominance and sexual behavior in primates. Very clinical, very input-output. He was watching monkeys fight and mate and trying to map it all to objective data.
So what changed? I mean, how do you go from studying monkey sex to studying the highest peaks of the human soul? That's a big jump.
It is. There were two major catalysts. The first was personal. He became a father.
Kids change everything.
They do. He looked at his first child and said, "I was stunned by the mystery. I felt small and weak." He realized that a human child is not a blank slate. They are not a robot you can just program with rewards and punishments.
Right.
He said anyone who had a baby couldn't be a behaviorist. It just didn't fit the reality of what he was seeing in his own home. The complexity was just too high.
And the second catalyst was historical. It was bigger than him.
It was World War II.
Hmm.
Right. Imagine the context. It's shortly after Pearl Harbor. The world is descending into hatred, war, and prejudice on a scale never seen before. Maslow is watching a parade, likely a military parade, and he's overcome with emotion.
What did he feel?
He felt a mix of revulsion and awe, and he had a vision. He resolved, right then and there, to prove that humans are capable of something better than this. He wanted to develop a psychology for the highest human ideals. He wanted to show that we aren't just wolves fighting for scraps.
And that resolve eventually leads to the hierarchy of needs. So let's unpack this properly. We have the 5 levels that everyone knows. But before we start climbing, we need to clear up some technical misconceptions. Because there is one big one that everyone gets wrong.
The video game myth.
The video game myth, exactly. I always thought it was like a video game. You have to get 100% on the food level before you unlock the safety level. You can't worry about poetry if you're even a little bit hungry.
That is the most common misunderstanding, and it drives psychologists crazy. Maslow never said that. He introduced a concept called prepotency.
Prepotency. Okay, that's a good SAT word. Define that for us.
It just means that lower needs are stronger and demand attention first. They have more power. But you don't need 100% satisfaction to move up.
So it's not an on-off switch.
No, it's more like a dimmer switch, or maybe a mixing board in a recording studio. All the faders are up at different levels at the same time.
The source material mentions the 85% rule.
Right. Maslow gave a hypothetical breakdown to explain this. He said an average person might be 85% satisfied in their physiological needs, 70% in safety, 50% in love, 40% in esteem, and maybe only 10% in self-actualization.
So we're a mix of all of them at once.
We are a mix of all these levels at once. It's fluid. You can be working on your masterpiece, a self-actualization activity, and then suddenly your stomach growls, a physiological need, and your focus shifts down. But the higher need doesn't disappear. It just takes a back seat for a moment.
Okay, that makes it feel much more realistic. It's a dynamic system, not a rigid ladder. So let's start at the bottom, the foundation. Level 1, physiological needs.
Food, water, air, sleep, sex. The absolute basics for survival. Maslow called these instinctoid needs.
Instinctoid. What's the oid for?
It means they are innate, they're hereditary, they're built into our biology. You don't learn to need water, but, and this is key, the behaviors to satisfy them are learned.
Ah, okay. So the need for food is universal, but whether you eat with a fork or chopsticks is learned.
Exactly. And they are powerful because they are about survival. Maslow used the swimming analogy. If you are swimming underwater and you run out of air, nothing else matters.
Nothing.
You don't care about your bank account. You don't care if people like you. You don't care about the painting you're working on. You just need air. The physiological need overrides everything else. It hijacks the brain.
But for most of us listening to this deep dive, in an affluent society, these aren't usually our main motivators. Or I'm rarely terrified of starving to death, thankfully.
Exactly. And this is a key point Maslow made. He called these deficit needs, or D needs. If you have them, you don't notice them.
Right.
You don't walk around saying, oh, wow, I have so much air today. This is amazing. You take it for granted. You only notice them when they are missing. Once they are met, they stop motivating your behavior. They become the background hum of your life.
Okay, so we have air, we have a sandwich, we aren't drowning, we move up to level 2. Safety needs.
This is security, stability, freedom from fear, and chaos. In infants, this is obvious. You startle a baby, they cry. They need routine. If you drop them, they freak out. They need to know the world is predictable.
But in adults, it's more subtle.
Much more subtle.
The source material mentions things like tenure, insurance, savings accounts.
Right. We don't usually run from saber-toothed tigers anymore, so our safety needs manifest as a desire for predictability in society. We prefer the known to the unknown. We stay in jobs we don't love because they have benefits and a pension. We buy insurance for our cars, our homes, our lives. We look for tenure.
Maslow also connected this to neurosis, right?
He did. He pointed out that obsessive-compulsive behaviors like, organizing your pencils in perfect rows or having a rigid, unchanging schedule can be an attempt to enforce order on a chaotic world.
That's really interesting. So if you feel unsafe in the big picture, maybe the world feels chaotic politically or financially, you control the little picture. You organize your desk to calm your anxiety.
Precisely. It's a safety mechanism. We are trying to build a small, predictable wall against the chaos of the universe.
Okay, so we are fed and we feel safe. The door is locked, the fridge is full. Now we get to the warm and fuzzy stuff. Level 3, belongingness and love needs.
This is the major shift. We move from survival to connection. We need friends, we need lovers, we need a family, a tribe. We need to feel like we are part of something larger than ourselves.
And Maslow made a really important distinction here between sex and love, right? Because sex was back at level 1, the physiological level.
He did, and it's a crucial one.
Yeah.
Sex is physiological level 1. It's a biological urge, a release of tension. Love is psychological level 3. It involves intimacy, mutuality, vulnerability, and trust. You can have sex without love, which satisfies a level 1 need, but you can't have deep connection without emotional intimacy, which is level 3.
This feels like the level where modern society is struggling the most. The source material brings up social media here, and that seems very relevant.
It is. We have built these incredible digital tools to simulate this belonging. But as we will see later when we look at the research, it's a double-edged sword. Fundamentally, this need is about overcoming the feeling of alienation, that exact loneliness Maslow felt as a child in Brooklyn. He knew that without this, you feel like a ghost in the machine.
Got it. So we belong, we have a crew, we aren't ghosts. Now we move up to level 4. Esteem needs. This is about feeling good about yourself.
Yes, but it has two distinct sides. And people often confuse them or lump them together. There is external esteem status, recognition, fame, awards, the stuff you can put on a resume or an Instagram post, the likes, the claps, the promotions.
The validation from the outside and the other side.
Internal esteem, self-worth, competence, confidence, mastery, feeling like you are adequate to the task of life, knowing you are good at what you do, even if no one is watching.
And presumably the internal one is more stable.
Much, much more stable. If your esteem relies entirely on other people clapping for you, it's incredibly fragile. The moment the applause stops, you collapse. If it comes from a deep internal sense of knowing you are competent and good, that's resilience. Maslow noted that if these needs aren't met, we feel inferior and helpless. We feel less than.
Okay, so that's the 4 layers we usually see on the posters. But here is where it gets really interesting. In our research for this, we found a lost hierarchy. Something Maslow wrote about that doesn't usually make it into the pop culture version. The cognitive needs.
This is so crucial, and it's almost always skipped. Maslow identified a second set of innate needs that sit sort of outside or alongside the main pyramid. The need to know and the need to understand.
Curiosity. Pure, simple curiosity.
Yes. Maslow argued this is innate. It's instinctoid. You see it in monkeys. You see it in kids. They just want to know how things work. They take things apart. They ask why 1,000 times a day.
But he made a distinction between knowing and understanding.
He did. There's a hierarchy within the hierarchy. We must first know, which is just getting the facts, collecting the data before we can understand, which is finding the meaning, seeing the patterns, connecting the dots.
And he had a pretty stinging critique of what happens when we ignore this, right? in our society.
He did. He talked about intelligent people leading stupid lives and stupid jobs.
Ouch. That stings a bit.
It's meant to. He believed that if you stifle that curiosity, if you are in a job that is boring and repetitive or a school that is rigid and just about rote memorization, it doesn't just make you bored, it makes you sick.
Sick how? Like physically sick?
Be psychologically sick. He believed it hampers your personality development. He said emotionally healthy people are attracted to the mysterious. They like the unknown. If you are bored by the unknown or afraid of it, that's actually a sign of neurosis.
Wow. So boredom isn't just a mood, it's a pathology. That is a heavy thought for anyone stuck in a cubicle right now staring at a spreadsheet they hate.
It suggests that feeding your brain is just as important as feeding your stomach. If you starve your curiosity, your soul withers.
Okay, so assuming we are curious, we're fed, we're safe, we're loved, and we're respected. We finally reached the pinnacle, level 5, self-actualization.
The big one. The top of the pyramid, the capstone of the whole theory.
Maslow defined this as, what humans can be, they must be.
Must is the key word there. It's not a hobby, it's not a preference, it's a drive. It is the maximum realization of your potential, your talents, your abilities.
But, and this is important, it doesn't mean you have to be famous. It doesn't mean you have to be Einstein or Mozart.
Not at all. He used the soup example, right?
Yes. I love this. He said, a first-rate soup is more creative than a second-rate painting.
Exactly. You can be a self-actualized parent, a self-actualized carpenter, a self-actualized teacher. It's about doing your thing to the very best of your ability. It's about being true to your own nature. If you are a rose, be the best rose you can be. Don't try to be a lily.
Now, there is a technical shift in motivation here that's really important. The lower needs were deficit needs. We do them because we lack something. We eat because we lack food. But self-actualization is different.
Completely different. Maslow called this metamotivation or be-motivation, which stands for being motivation. When you are self-actualizing, you aren't striving for a goal to make a bad feeling go away. You aren't trying to reduce tension. In fact, you often increase tension.
Wait, explain that. Why would we want to increase tension? We spend our whole lives trying to relax. We go to spas and do yoga to reduce tension.
Do we? Think about someone training for a marathon, or someone writing a complex novel, or learning a difficult language. That creates tension. It hurts. It's stressful. It requires discipline.
Okay, good.
But a self-actualizer seeks that challenge because the journey itself is the reward. They are developing from within, not chasing a carrot on a stick. They are stretching themselves to see what they're capable of.
That distinction is profound. You aren't working to get the paycheck, which is a safety need. You are working because the work itself fulfills you.
Precisely. And this state comes with its own set of needs, which Maslow called met needs. These aren't things like food or shelter. There are things like truth, goodness, beauty, wholeness, aliveness, playfulness.
And if you don't get them, if those are blocked.
You don't starve to death, but you get metapathology. If you are denied truth, you become cynical and mistrustful. If you are denied beauty, you succumb to vulgarity and ugliness. If you are denied playfulness, you become grim and depressed. Maslow believed these weren't just nice-to-haves. The soul gets sick without them.
So who are these people? Who actually makes it to the top of the pyramid? Maslow tried to study them, and he came up with a statistic that is, well, it's a little depressing, honestly.
The 1% statistic. Maslow estimated that less than 1% of the population reaches true self-actualization.
Less than 1%. That makes it sound like a secret club. A VIP lounge for the soul.
It is rare. And remember how he studied it. He didn't just poll random people. He looked at biographies of historical and contemporary giants, people like Albert Einstein, Thomas Jefferson, Harriet Tubman, Eleanor Roosevelt. He wanted to see what the fastest runners had in common.
So let's profile the perfect human, or at least the self-actualized one. What do they look like? If we met one, would we even know?
You might actually find them a bit strange or aloof, but here are the key traits Maslow identified. First, they have an efficient perception of reality.
What does that mean exactly?
It means they see the world as it is, not as they want it to be or fear it to be. They don't view things through the lens of their own needs. They are objective. They spot fakes, phonies, and dishonesty instantly. They know when someone is lying, and more importantly, they know when they are lying to themselves.
That's harder than it sounds.
Yeah.
Most of us have some serious rose-colored glasses on, or maybe gray-colored glasses.
It's incredibly difficult. Second, they have acceptance. They accept their own flaws. And they accept nature's flaws. They don't feel guilty about being human. They aren't fighting reality. They don't agonize over getting old or that bad things happen. They accept it as part of the process.
That sounds incredibly peaceful.
It is. They also possess spontaneity and simplicity. They don't play roles. They aren't trying to impress you. Their inner life is unconventional, but they might follow social rules on the surface just to be polite. They'll wear a tie to a wedding, but they don't internalize those rules. They live by their own moral code. They are authentic.
Here's one that stood out to me from the notes: the need for privacy.
This one confuses people. We think of good people as always being social, always helping, always available, but self-actualizers can be alone without being lonely. In fact, they crave solitude.
Why?
Because they are autonomous. They depend on themselves for their satisfaction, not on others. This can make them seem a bit aloof or cold sometimes.
So they don't need you, they choose you.
Exactly, and that can be intimidating for people who need constant validation from others.
But they also have what Maslow called a freshness of appreciation.
This is my favorite trait. A self-actualizer can look at a sunset or a flower or a baby and be just as amazed and awestruck the 100th time as they were the first time. Their experience doesn't go stale. They live in a constant state of low-level awe. They don't get bored of the miracle of existence.
And sometimes high-level awe. He talked about peak experiences.
Yes, these are moments of intense ecstasy, transcendence, a feeling of being supremely powerful, confident, and connected to the entire universe. Maslow compared them to religious mystical experiences, but he found they could happen anywhere, at a baseball game, while deeply engaged in work, while listening to music. It's a moment where the self dissolves and you feel one with the world.
So this all sounds amazing, which brings us to the big question. If we are all born with these needs, if we all have this potential hardwired into us, why are we not all self-actualized? Why is it only 1%? What is stopping the other 99% of us?
Maslow identified several major barriers. The first is simply that the higher needs are the weakest. The voice of, "I need food," is a scream. The voice of, "I need to fulfill my potential," is a whisper. It gets drowned out easily by poverty, by bad parenting, by social pressure to conform.
Let's talk about that childhood influence again. We talked about Maslow's terrible childhood, but what kind of childhood helps someone get to the top?
It's a delicate balance. Overprotection is bad. It stops a child from taking the risks needed to build confidence and competence. It makes them timid.
Sure.
But permissiveness, too much freedom, is also bad because it creates anxiety.
Yeah.
The child doesn't feel safe. Their safety needs are unmet because they don't know where the boundaries are. You need a foundation of safety and love in those first 2 years. Maslow said sufficient love in childhood is a prerequisite for self-actualization.
But there is also a barrier that comes from inside us, a self-imposed barrier. And this is a concept I think everyone listening needs to hear, the Jonah complex.
Yeah, this is fascinating. It's named after the biblical Jonah, who tried to run away when God gave him a mission. The Jonah complex is the fear of our own greatness.
We fear our own greatness. I thought we all wanted to be great. We all want to be the hero of the movie.
We say we do, but deep down, Maslow argued, we fear that fulfilling our potential will lead to situations we can't handle. We are afraid of the responsibility that comes with talent. If you admit you are talented, you have an obligation to use it. That's heavy. It's safer to be small. It's safer to be average.
So we self-sabotage. We procrastinate. We play dumb. We stay in the comfortable job.
Exactly. Maslow said self-actualization requires courage. You have to be willing to abandon the familiar. You have to be willing to be misunderstood. And that is terrifying. So many of us stand at the edge of our potential, look over the cliff, and step back into the safety of the known.
That hits hard. The fear of one's own greatness. That is something I think I'm going to be chewing on for a long time. Okay, so Maslow developed this theory in the mid-20th century. But we are the deep dive. We always want to know, does it hold up? What does modern science say?
It's interesting. Maslow didn't do hard science in the traditional sense. He didn't run rats through mazes to test for self-actualization. He relied on observation and biography. And critics, they called it subjective. They said he just picked people he admired and called them self-actualized.
Which is a fair critique. It's not a random sample.
It is a fair critique, but modern research has actually validated a lot of his core ideas in surprising ways.
Let's look at the assessment tools. There's something called a POI.
The Personal Orientation Inventory. It's a questionnaire that was developed specifically to measure self-actualization. It looks at two main things: time competence, which is basically, do you live in the present, or are you stuck in the past or constantly worrying about the future? And inner directedness. Do you follow your own compass, your own values, or do you look to others for approval and direction?
And what did they find when they used this tool?
Well, studies show that people who score high on this, people who are more self-actualized, also tend to be more creative, more emotionally healthy, and more autonomous. It proves that this state Maslow described actually exists. It's a real measurable thing. It's not just a philosophical fantasy.
And then there is a study that feels very, very relevant to today, the smartphone basic needs scale.
Yes, this is from 2014 by Kang and Young. They wanted to see how our smartphones fit into the hierarchy, and they found, not surprisingly, that smartphones are powerful tools for satisfying the belongingness need.
Sure.
We use them to get closer to people. We text, we like, we share, we stay connected.
There has to be a but.
But it can become a crutch. If you are satisfying your belonging need entirely through a screen, are you really meeting it in a deep way? Or is it like eating junk food instead of a nourishing meal? It suggests that digital belonging might be a shallow version of the real thing. It scratches the itch, but it doesn't truly nourish you.
Speaking of belonging, there was that study about chat rooms that sounded just brutal.
The chat room study, this is fascinating. Researchers put students in a simulated online chat room with what they thought were other students. Then they rigged it so the student was completely excluded. No one replied to them, no one acknowledged them. They were ghosted by the entire room in real time.
That is everyone's social nightmare.
Immediately, within just a few minutes, those excluded students reported lower self-esteem and a loss of control. But here is the kicker. Later, they asked them to recall events from a diary. The lonely, excluded students remembered significantly more social events from the diary.
Why? Why would they remember more?
Because they were starving for it.
Ah.
Exactly. When you are hungry, you notice food everywhere, you smell every restaurant you walk past. When you are lonely, your brain fixates on connection. It validates Maslow's idea that a deficit creates a fixation. You become obsessed with what you lack.
Let's talk about self-esteem. Maslow put it at level 4. Modern society seems obsessed with it. We are always telling kids, good job for everything. Is high self-esteem always a good thing?
Generally, yes. The research is pretty clear. People with high self-esteem get more job offers, they cope better with failure, they are physically healthier. Low self-esteem is strongly linked to anxiety, depression, addiction, and school dropout rates.
And what about its connection to social media usage?
There is a very strong correlation. Students with lower self-esteem spend significantly more time on Facebook and other social media platforms.
Why?
They are looking for that validation they lack internally. They are hunting for external esteem, the likes, the comments, because they don't have that stable internal esteem.
There was also some interesting nuance in the source material about culture and self-esteem. It's not the same for everyone.
Right. For example, in the U.S., Black teenagers often report higher self-esteem than white teenagers, and that self-esteem tends to increase through adulthood. On the flip side, Asian Americans often report lower self-esteem than European Americans unless they feel strong social connections to their ethnic group.
So what does that tell us?
It shows that esteem isn't just an individual thing. It's deeply tied to how we fit into our culture and our community. It's contextual.
So Maslow's legacy? It seems like the modern version of his theory is something called self-determination theory.
This is the contemporary heir. If Maslow was the grandfather of this way of thinking, this is the grandchild. Self-determination theory, or SDT, boils human well-being down to 3 innate universal needs.
What are they?
Competence, which is like Maslow's esteem and mastery. Autonomy, which is the freedom to choose your own path. And relatedness, which is connection and belonging.
Competence, autonomy, relatedness. And the focus is on intrinsic motivation.
Right.
Doing things because you love them, not because you're going to get a reward. That is pure Maslow. That is metamotivation. It's about the joy of the activity itself, which is the hallmark of a healthy, thriving person.
So, as we wrap this up, let's zoom out. Maslow changed the game. He shifted the focus of psychology. He told us to stop looking at our sickness and start looking at our potential. He gave us a map to the best version of ourselves.
He was a profound optimist. He believed human nature is basically decent. He believed that if you give people the right conditions, safety, love, respect, they will naturally grow toward the light, like a plant. If you give a plant water and sun, it grows. It doesn't need to be forced or punished into growing.
But he wasn't naive. And I think this is important to mention because people often paint him as this starry-eyed dreamer, this kind of hippie guru. No, not at all. And this is a provocative thought to end on. Maslow admitted that while human nature is generally good, there are exceptions. He believed some people were evil beyond reclamation. He actually wrote in his private journal that for some people, nothing will work ultimately but shooting.
Wow. That is a darker, harder side of Maslow we don't usually hear about.
It is. It reminds us that he wasn't just preaching love and light. He was looking at reality. He lived through World War II. He knew that evil exists. He knew that self-actualization is a struggle. It's a fight against our environment, against our past, and most importantly, against our own fears. It's not guaranteed.
So here is the challenge for you, the listener. Where are you on the pyramid right now? What's the main thing driving you? Are you stuck chasing safety? Are you hungry for esteem? Or are you maybe standing at the threshold of your own potential, feeling that Jonah complex, that fear of your own greatness?
The path to the top is open, but you have to be willing to walk it. You have to have the courage to be the 1%.
Find your metamotivation. Stop fearing your own potential. Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.